Welcome, my friends, and a very warm welcome to all our dedicated followers joining us from every corner of the globe. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here for this highly critical extended deep dive session. Today, we are not just skimming the surface of personal finance. We are dismantling, analyzing, and rebuilding our understanding of what it means to achieve financial security in a rapidly changing world. We are standing in the middle of 2026, and the ground beneath our retirement planning has just undergone a massive, historic shift. For decades, generations of workers looked at Social Security as the unshakable bedrock of their golden years, an ironclad, government-backed guarantee that would always be there to catch them. But the rules of the game have officially broken. The countdown to insolvency is no longer a distant whisper for future generations. It is an accelerating reality that is knocking directly on our door. And today, we are going to dissect the precise, granular details of this fiscal crisis and map out the exact, powerful strategic moves you need to make to fully insulate and protect your hard-earned retirement. To truly appreciate the magnitude of what we are facing, we have to look directly at the raw, unvarnished data that has emerged right now in June of 2026. Just days ago, on June 9th, 2026, the Social Security trustees released their highly anticipated annual report, and the findings sent shockwaves through the financial community. According to their latest, most precise actuarial calculations, the primary trust fund that is responsible for paying out retirement benefits to tens of millions of Americans, the Old Age and Survivors Insurance, OASI Trust Fund, is now projected to completely exhaust its reserves by late 2032. Let that timeline sink in for a moment. We are sitting in 2026, which means we have a mere 6 years left on the clock before the buffer is entirely gone. This isn't just a status quo continuation of old warnings. The insolvency timeline is actively compressing. Earlier this year, in February, the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, adjusted its own models to bring the depletion date forward to 2032, moving it up from their previous estimate of 2033. When you have the independent budget analysts at the CBO and the internal actuaries of the Social Security Administration landing squarely on the exact same year, the luxury of waving this off as a worst-case political forecast evaporates. It is a mathematical certainty based on current statutory law. Now, it is vital to demystify what insolvency, or running out of money, actually means in the context of Social Security, because a lack of precise understanding breeds unnecessary panic. The trust fund hitting zero does not mean the program vanishes into thin air, nor does it mean your monthly checks drop to zero. The system is fueled by continuous daily inflows of payroll taxes collected from the active workforce under the Federal Insurance Contributions Act, FICA. Therefore, even when the accumulated historical reserves are entirely depleted, money will still be flowing into the system. However, by law, the Social Security Administration cannot pay out more than it collects. On the exact day those reserves hit empty in late 2032, the incoming tax revenues will only be sufficient to cover approximately 78 cents of every dollar of promised benefits. This triggers an automatic across-the-board benefit cut of 22% for every single beneficiary, without requiring a single vote from Congress. If we look at the CBO's specific granular projections, they map out a scenario where we could see an initial 7% drop in 2032, which violently deepens to an average annual cut of 28% between the years 2033 and 2036. To put this into clear, devastating perspective for the average household, a retiree drawing a typical monthly benefit of $2,015 would see their income slashed so drastically that it amounts to an annual loss of nearly $6,800 by 2036. For millions of seniors, that represents the entire margin between financial independence and severe economic distress. How did we get here so much faster than anyone anticipated? The acceleration of this timeline is driven by a perfect storm of recent legislative changes and macroeconomic realities that have systematically drained revenue while piling on massive new obligations. First, look at the legislative actions that have chipped away at the program's funding. The passage of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act introduced a substantial $6,000 senior tax deduction. While intended to provide immediate relief to elderly citizens, it had the severe secondary effect of shrinking the aggregate payroll tax base flowing into the trust funds. Compounding this, the Social Security Fairness Act was enacted, which extended full, unreduced retirement benefits to roughly 3 million public sector workers, such as teachers, police officers, and firefighters, who were previously subject to the Windfall Elimination Provision, WEP, and the Government Pension Offset, GPO. While celebrating this as a win for public servants, we must acknowledge the clinical financial reality. It instantly added nearly $200 billion in long-term obligations to a system already operating in the red. When you combine these legislative drains with the persistent, higher-than-expected inflation we've experienced, the fiscal hole deepens exponentially. Because Social Security features an automatic cost of living adjustment, COLA, tied to inflation, the program has been forced to push out massive cash outlays much faster than historical actuarial projections ever assumed. To measure the severity of this structural imbalance, the trustees calculate the program's long-term actuarial deficit as a percentage of all taxable wages. Just 1 year ago, that structural gap stood at 3.82%. In the 2026 report, it skyrocketed to 4.42%, marking the largest single-year jump in recent memory. While inflation and spending bills played their parts, the true quiet driver behind this staggering leap is demographic. Americans are simply having fewer children than the actuaries' long-term models assumed. Fewer future workers mean fewer individuals paying into the system to support a rapidly expanding pool of long-lived retirees. The clock is ticking faster, and the ultimate bill to fix it is getting bigger by the day. The financial squeeze, however, isn't waiting around for the year 2032 to make itself felt. It is actively eroding the purchasing power of current retirees right now in 2026. Let's look at the micro-level numbers to see how this plays out in real time. The cost of living adjustment for 2026 landed at a modest 2.8%, which translates to an extra $56 per month for the average retiree. On paper, a raise is a raise. But almost simultaneously, Medicare announced its Part B premium schedules for 2026, bumping the base premium up by a staggering 9.7% to $202.90 per month. Because Medicare premiums are typically deducted directly from Social Security checks, this single healthcare adjustment instantly clawed back roughly a third of the entire COLA raise before the money ever touched a retiree's bank account. For higher income retirees who cross into the Income-Related Monthly Adjustment Amount, IRMAA tiers, the reality was even harsher. Their entire annual raise was completely wiped out, and in some instances, their net monthly checks actually went down. To make matters more challenging, the May 2026 Consumer Price Index, CPI numbers, just printed at 4.2%, marking the highest annual inflation rate we have seen in 3 years. When you dissect that inflation report line by line, the items seeing the most aggressive spikes are the non-discretionary expenses that households cannot avoid. Gasoline is up a staggering 40.5% year over year. Airfares have surged by 20.7%, and food at home has posted its sharpest monthly gain since late 2022. This brings us to a fundamental flaw in how retirement planning treats inflation. The headline CPI number reflects a broad basket of goods, but seniors do not spend money like the average 30-year-old worker. When we look at the experimental index designed specifically to track senior spending patterns, the RCPIE, it consistently runs much hotter than headline inflation. Why? Because retirees allocate a significantly higher percentage of their monthly cash flow to the two exact categories that are rising the fastest and are completely inescapable: healthcare and shelter. What this tells us is that within a matter of mere months, the three foundational structural assumptions that have anchored virtually every traditional retirement plan in America have completely shattered. Assumption number one was that the trust fund possessed decades of comfortable cushion, giving Washington plenty of time to orchestrate a smooth, painless fix. Assumption number two was that Social Security's annual COLA would reliably and meaningfully keep pace with the actual goods and services that retirees buy. Assumption number three was that headline inflation figures served as a reasonable proxy for the true cost of being old in America. Today, we must look at the data and courageously admit that not a single one of those assumptions holds true anymore. But let me be absolutely clear. This is not a directive to panic, nor is it a message of doom. Panic is a completely useless financial strategy. The solution to this compounding crisis is elegant in its simplicity, though it requires discipline. You must stop treating a single volatile government program as the structural foundation of your private retirement plan. If the rules of the system have broken, you simply change how you play the game. To achieve total financial insulation and ensure your retirement remains bulletproof regardless of what happens in Washington, you must aggressively execute 4 precise strategic moves. First and foremost, you must treat Social Security as just another line item income source, not the foundational income source. We have to look back at the history of the program to understand where modern planning went off the rails. When Social Security was signed into law during the New Deal era, it was explicitly engineered to serve as a baseline safety net, a financial floor designed to prevent elderly Americans from falling into abject poverty. It was never intended to fund an active, multi-decade lifestyle of leisure, travel, and comfort. Somewhere in the late stages of the corporate pension era, as traditional defined benefit pensions vanished and were replaced by self-directed 401k plans, that vital historical distinction got completely lost. The defining systemic mistake of the past 40 years of retirement planning has been treating Social Security as a guaranteed, rock-solid foundation, strong enough to anchor an entire household budget. It cannot bear that weight. The retirement plans that will survive and thrive over the next several decades do not operate on a naive formula of Social Security plus a little bit of savings. Instead, they utilize an optimized investment portfolio engineered to independently generate the precise cash flow the household requires, treating Social Security as a welcome supplementary contributor rather than the primary engine. Every income stream carries its own distinct set of risks. Social Security's job is to mitigate longevity risk, albeit imperfectly. Your private portfolio's job is to aggressively cover everything that Social Security cannot. The second strategic move requires you to get your benefit claiming decision absolutely right, because the mathematical realities governing this choice are moving in only one direction. Right now, because of the widespread anxiety surrounding the 2032 insolvency timeline, there is a powerful, highly dangerous temptation spreading among pre-retirees to claim their benefits as early as possible, often at age 62, under the assumption that it is better to grab whatever cash they can before the system faces a cut. This is an incredibly bad trade, and the math proves it. The established rules dictate that for every year you delay claiming your benefits past your full retirement age up until age 70, your guaranteed monthly check grows by roughly 8% per year. Delaying from age 62 to age 70 results in a permanent, guaranteed increase in your monthly baseline check of approximately 77%. That mathematical reality has not changed one bit because of the 2032 timeline. Think about the mechanics of a potential legislative cut. If Congress ultimately permits an across-the-board reduction to take place, that percentage haircut will be applied to whatever baseline benefit you have established. If you claim early at 62, you lock yourself into a permanently reduced baseline check. If a 22% cut then hits the system in 2032, you will take that massive percentage reduction on top of an already diminished base, creating a compounding negative effect that is far more devastating. Furthermore, history provides vital context. Congress has a consistent pattern of waiting until the absolute 11th hour to implement bipartisan fixes. During the massive 1983 Social Security crisis, the comprehensive reforms did not pass until the trust funds were within mere months of literal depletion. The overwhelming probability is that Washington will repeat this exact pattern as 2032 approaches. Claiming early as a knee-jerk reaction to dodge a hypothetical cut that will likely be legislatively mitigated locks in a guaranteed permanent financial loss. Do not make that trade unless severe health challenges, shortened longevity expectations, or unavoidable immediate cash flow crises force your hand on independent grounds. Third, you must take immediate steps to construct an entirely independent income floor specifically dedicated to covering your household's essential expenses. The single most valuable, high-impact exercise that any pre-retiree or current retiree can perform right now is to sit down with a blank ledger and rigorously categorize their projected retirement spending into two distinct buckets: essential and discretionary. Essential expenses are the non-negotiables that you must pay to keep your life running smoothly. Property taxes, healthcare premiums, out-of-pocket medical costs, food, basic utilities, and property insurance. Discretionary expenses are the extras: travel, dining out, hobbies, and luxury purchases. Let's look at a concrete example. Imagine a retired couple who requires a total lifestyle budget of $120,000 per year to live comfortably. Upon reviewing their detailed ledger, they discover that their absolute essential fixed expenses account for $70,000 of that total. In the old era of planning, they would shrug and assume that Social Security would easily cover that $70,000 baseline. In the new era, that framework is dangerously obsolete. The test of a modern, resilient retirement plan is whether that $70,000 essential floor is fully secure and funded, regardless of whether Social Security pays out 100% of its promises or suffers a major disruption after 2032. You must align your private portfolio, utilizing a combination of dividend growth equities, fixed income ladders, or dedicated income-producing assets to ensure your baseline survival costs are structurally insulated. The objective here is not to embark on a retirement completely devoid of Social Security. The objective is to build a master financial plan that simply refuses to break if Social Security delivers less than originally promised. The fourth and final strategic move is an absolute necessity for high earners. You must proactively stress test your entire financial plan for what the eventual political fix will likely cost you. Let's step away from the political rhetoric and look at the hard fiscal realities of how Washington operates. When the pressure mounts and Congress is finally forced to act to prevent a 22% systemic collapse, the financial burden of that fix historically falls heaviest on the shoulders of upper-income citizens. This is the unvarnished pattern of every major entitlement reform in living memory. Look back at the 1983 changes. They didn't just push the full retirement age from 65 to 67 and raise payroll taxes. They also made up to 50% of Social Security benefits subject to federal income tax for the first time in history. In 1993, another legislative adjustment pushed that taxable threshold up to 85% for higher income brackets. The upcoming 2032 resolution will almost certainly repeat this exact playbook in a modernized format. As of right now, the maximum amount of annual wages subject to the Social Security payroll tax is capped at $184,500. The primary policy options currently circulating through legislative committees include completely eliminating that cap to tax all earned income, implementing an aggressive means testing mechanism that systematically reduces monthly benefit payouts for affluent retirees, or shifting the annual COLA calculation to a significantly slower growing inflation index like the chained CPI. The trustees' own data explicitly warns that procrastination drastically increases the price of admission. If Washington were to step up and permanently fix the shortfall today via a straightforward payroll tax increase, the combined tax rate would need to rise from its current 12.4% to 16.65%. If they stall and wait until the exact moment the money runs dry in 2032, that required rate climbs to 17.3%. The longer politicians delay, the steeper the ultimate cost becomes. and the fewer working-age citizens will be left to shoulder the burden. This is no longer a cynical political forecast. It is a vital, mandatory planning assumption. If you are a high earner, you must instruct your financial advisors to run an immediate stress test on your plan, assuming a permanent 10% to 15% reduction in your expected lifetime Social Security benefits. If you build a comprehensive plan that effortlessly survives that specific haircut, you completely insulate yourself from whatever compromises Washington ultimately decides to make. When we take a step back and examine the broader trajectory of American financial life, we realize that Social Security became the undisputed dominant assumption in retirement planning only because the rest of the macroeconomic system, corporate pensions, employer-subsidized healthcare, and highly predictable low inflation, was doing the overwhelming majority of the heavy lifting. As those structural corporate supports systematically weakened over the last several decades, the Social Security program was gradually asked to carry far more weight than its architects ever engineered it to bear. The alarming numbers we are reviewing are simply the metaphorical bill arriving in the mail. The trust fund's countdown clock has officially wound down to 6 years, and the pace is visibly quickening. The modest annual raises seniors receive are being aggressively clawed back by healthcare costs in the exact same year they are announced, and real-world inflation is slamming households hardest in the exact spending categories that retirees can least avoid. The ultimate takeaway from this extensive analysis is that successful, enduring retirement planning can no longer afford to depend on the whims, timelines, or promises of Washington. The individuals who will achieve true peace of mind are those who consciously choose to take absolute control over their own financial destiny. They treat Social Security as a welcome bonus, a single contributor to a multifaceted, privately engineered income machine. Plan with absolute discipline for the variables that sit entirely within your sphere of personal control. Let the politicians debate, stall, and negotiate as the 2032 deadline approaches. Whatever fixes they eventually deliver will simply be pure, unexpected upside on top of an already bulletproof plan that you built with your own foresight, wisdom, and strategic action. Thank you so much for your deep attention today, and here is to building a secure, prosperous, and entirely independent financial future.